I think we'll begin. Welcome everyone to the third workshop in the Good Clinical Practice series. I do want to tell you that I will introduce our lovely speaker in a moment, that we do have other workshops that are available. There is actually one coming up in leadership in November. The date might change on that one, but we do have one coming up in leadership, and then there's going to be a translational teamwork one coming up as well. These are not series. The leadership one is actually a single one and done session, and the other series, the translational teamwork, is going to be throughout the year, not just the semester. So I'm going to put that in box so that you can actually get to the website if you want to take a look at those. Translational teamwork's not up yet, but it will be up shortly. I also want to tell you that there is a micro-credential available in Good Clinical Practice. And if you're interested in signing up for this, and it is free, it also is flexible timeline. Basically, you can complete it on the time that you wish. And I will put my email address. I'm Catherine Sedota in the chat. And if you'd like to sign up for that, just email me. If you come to all 4 of these sessions, you can receive a certificate of completion, which you'll get approximately 2 weeks after the last workshop, which is not next week. There's actually a gap in between. So we're going to skip next Tuesday, and it's the Tuesday after that. If you did miss one of this or 2 of the workshops and you'd still like the certificate of completion, again, please email me and I will tell you about a protocol you can use in videos in order to still get that certificate if you think that you would like that. Finally, CME credits are available, and I will be sending that to the CME office, up to 6 credits if you need continuing ed and you happen to be in the medical field. So at this time, I want to tell you that this particular workshop is entitled What Makes a Clinical Trial GCP Compliant? Practical Applications of Training. And we have a wonderful presenter. Her name is Kim Brunton, and she's Associate Director in Clinical Research at the Clinical Research Office. And that happens to be right here at UB. So we're really lucky to have her. And I'm going to pass it over to her.
Thank you, Catherine, and welcome to everybody. I just wanted to say I've built some different time breaks within the presentation for, if you happen to have any questions, but feel free throughout if you have something that pops up, either raise your hand or put it in the chat box. And Catherine, if you wouldn't mind keeping an eye on that for me, that would be awesome. And with that, I am going to start. I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as I can, because a lot of this is going to be review for some of the training that you've already done, and I've noticed a couple of the names that have been to the other workshops as well. So I don't want to belabor a lot of points there, but we are going to review what GCP entails and the components of that. We are going to look at the responsibilities of each entity that is involved in making compliant clinical trial. It starts right from the ground up. We are going to highlight the responsibilities of the investigator and, by extension, the team that the investigator has put together. And then we're going to look at how this really applies in practice by looking at a few case studies. Okay, that being said, so if you're doing research at the university, really pretty much anywhere, you are going to be required to take a GCP course of some sort. Either that's through a university, through city, through a sponsor, other online thing. What comes out of it is you've got a little piece of paper that says that you've got a certificate of completion, that you've done your training. Now, what that piece of paper means to you can be very, very different from what it means to an auditor. And you can kind of see the disparity of what that is in this little pic. But suffice to say that you are going to be audited on all of those things that make GCP, make up your GCP certificate and what that means. So, as an overview, the key principles, again, ethical conduct. These are going to be the things that have been brought out as you studied the Belmont report and the Declaration of Helsinki as part of the city GCP training. Scientific rigor. Your study has got to have scientific merit. The design and the way that it is carried out actually has to be scientifically sound to be GCP compliant. Data integrity. If you don't present accurate and truthful data, your trial's reliability is really in question. So data integrity becomes very, very important. And then regulatory compliance. And this is probably going to be something that I'm going to hit a little heavier through the presentation, because there are a lot of elements to regulatory compliance. And it encompasses a lot of different aspects, some of which are outside of the FDA or the Code of Federal Regulations. We're going to talk a little bit more about those things that are outside of what we consider FDA, excuse me, as we move along. So anybody who has been to Dr. Sethi's session will recognize this pic. These are all of the different things that go into the considerations to make GCP compliant research. So we're going to break them down just a little bit. And we're going to start off with the FDA, the Common Rule, and ICH GCP. We often hear about, a lot of people will be, oh yeah, 21 CFR 56, 50, 312. And they bandy these regulation codes around what really does that mean. So the Code of Federal Regulations is comprised of 50 titles, and they have very, very broad subject matter that's all related to federal regulation. And it goes straight from, Title 11, which is federal elections, to Title 50, which deals with wildlife and fisheries. So the one that we are interested in is Title 21. And Title 21 is everything food and drugs. And so the agency that provides that regulation is between the HHS, the Health and Human Services, and the FDA. So federal regulations, Part 50, you can see all the different things, the different parts are what are the specific things under Title 21. So you can see here all of the different, the protection of human subjects. You've got your institutional review boards, how they're comprised, what their makeup is, what their responsibilities are. It goes through a lot of the responsibilities basically for everyone. Investigational new drugs are all handled under Section 312. And again, you can see and these are all hyperlinked, so you can get to these various guidelines when you get the slide deck. But it does provide a lot of information. And investigational new drugs, if you hear me say IND later on, that's what this is. An IND is an investigational new drug. Similarly, there are regulations for device, and they are under 812. They're a little bit different in some of the regulatory needs between an IND and an investigational device, which is typically called an IDE. And a lot of that is in the Form 1572, which we're going to go into a little bit more depth in just a little bit. But for device studies, instead of 1572, they have what's called a statement of the investigator, and it basically governs how they are how they're conducting that study. The FDA provides a lot of regulations and guidance documents that govern how research is to be conducted. If you've ever taken a look at the Code of Federal Regulations, it is long. it is arduous, and many, many times it is vague. So the FDA has put out these guidance documents on all sorts of different topics. And I'm going to tell you, like, this is one of them. It does go into a lot of different things for, investigators, sponsors, IRBs. So it does handle a lot of that, but there are some specific guidance documents as well. They usually go through some draft period, and then they open it to comment, and then it becomes something that they put out on the website. Now, they are all available electronically. The easiest way to get to it is just a Google search on FDA guidance documents, and then you will get the whole list and host of what is available in their guidance documents. The Form 1572, again, it's not used by device. When you have a 1572, it's usually something that it involves investigational new drug, and it usually comes from an external sponsor, be that another institution, another individual, pharma, those types of things. If you are an investigator and you are creating your own study and you are applying for your own IND, then is a little bit different. You're going for a Form 1571. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I will leave that kind of a little bit more on the back burner because it's not something that we see a lot. But there are specific regulations that apply to that as well. Excuse me. The big thing with when an investigator initiated and you have your own IND, you are becoming the sponsor investigator. And as such, you have the responsibility of all of those things that the sponsor is responsible for, but also all of those things that the investigator is responsible for. And you'll see that a little bit later as to what that breaks down into. A lot of times you get a regulatory packet, and your coordinator will throw a host of documents under your and with all these little tabs, sign here, sign here, sign here. The 1572 is not just something that your protocol deems that you need to sign it. You need to understand it. It is your legally binding contract between you and the FDA to conduct that clinical trial. If you fail to comply with all of the things that it says that you're going to do, it can lead to some serious consequences, and you really don't want to become a statistic. Some of those, the failures to comply with what your contract basically says are some of the most common citations noted on FDA inspection. So we're going to kind of look a little bit more very quickly at what you are saying that you're going to do. And as that you're going to personally conduct that and supervise the adherence to the protocol. And I would say the approved protocol. So that becomes very important. Your IRB is approving a protocol as you write it and you submit it. So that's what they are approving, and that's what you need to follow. That you're going to, properly inform participants that it's investigational. That's one of the big components, is them understanding that this is an investigational drug, that you've got a informed consent that is properly constituted. And usually the IRB review will take care of that. There are essential elements that are needed to be present in a consent form. And then there are some other basic add-ons, but the basic elements need to be there. That you are going to report adverse events. Usually that comes out to serious adverse events for the IRB and adverse events to the sponsor, as well as SAEs. And accurate records that are maintained and regulatory ready. And we are going to go a little bit more into that because I think that that is becoming more and more important. The other is to understand the risk and benefits as laid out in your investigator brochure. The people working on the study need to know what their role is and how they are supposed to conduct that study. That is ultimately your responsibility. That you've done the appropriate IRB review, both the initial, all the continuing reviews, any reporting that is required, any modifications that are needed. If you've got those RNIs, those are all those things that need to be considered when you're talking and you say you're going to ensure that the IRB requirements have been met. And that you are following the what is required of the investigator under 312. And again, if you don't know what's in 312, then you're telling the FDA that you're going to comply. So you really should know what that means. You cannot change the elements of your protocol unless the subject is in immediate danger. So if it's a hazard to the individual, your medical do no harm takes precedence over any research. But in the day-to-day, your protocol basically is your Bible. So that's what you need to follow. As far as documentation, this is regulatory documentation. And this is part of that that you're signing on the FDA Form 1572, that you're going to maintain an accurate records available for inspection. So ICH GCP provides a checklist of regulatory documents that must be kept as study records. And there's a list here that entails that hyperlink actually will take you to that guidance and the checklist that kind of will tell you a little bit more about which binder tabs you need and how your regulatory binder or documentation needs to be kept. But you can see the list here. I want to draw specific attention to a couple of things. One is the qualification documentation. This usually amounts to the licensures for your study personnel you included, CVs. Usually a CV needs to be signed and dated on the front page within 2 years every 2 years. Your GCP documentation is included in there as well. Delegation of authority. And this is something I haven't seen a lot in some of the investigator-initiated or NIH trials, but it is very important. And so this is what the one that we have looks like. And what that does is says, here's my co-investigator, and they can do physical exams, they can get consent. They cannot do, but I'm not going to delegate completing the ECRF or reporting, or dispensing, let's say dispensing drug. But Susie Smith, she can get consent, she can do drug accountability, she can do all the reporting. So this says what you are delegating, and you're not delegating your responsibility, you are delegating a task. So ultimately, the responsibility is yours. So when you delegate any of these tasks, that you as the investigator need to make sure that who you are assigning that task to is prepared by either licensure, scope of practice, experience, what have you, that they can actually complete that task and do it, and you are confident that they have the ability, the training, and whatnot to do that. So the delegation of authority page becomes very, very important. And I can tell you from FDA audits, they look at this. Just keeping that in mind. Under ICH guidelines, you are required to keep a master subject identification log at the study site to serve as proof that the site subjects are actually real people. And so some will take this out as a screening log, and then they'll have a separate enrollment log. This one combines them, and but it does meet the guidelines. Excuse me. There are other documents you may not have thought of. Drug accountability. So drug accountability, kind of a little bit of a no-brainer that you need to make sure that the drug is received as it's supposed to, that it's signed in, lot numbers are noted, expiration dates are noted, who it was dispensed to, did they return it, all of those things. And the other caveat to that is temperature logs. So if your drug is supposed to be kept between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius, how are you proving that? Because you need to prove it. So we have temperature log sheets. We have we in the CRO have an external system that monitors absolutely everything, including ambient temperature and relative humidity, because sometimes you need to do that as well. So know what you need to keep an eye on, as far as, especially for temperatures. Know what happens if you've got an excursion. If it says that it needs to be kept between 2 and 8 degrees and it goes to 8.5, what do I do now? Because you need to know that. Calibration reports, calibration records. Okay, now you're getting weights, you're getting blood pressures, you've got your temperature probes. Are they calibrated? Are they accurate? Can you count on what they are saying? So calibration reports need to be part of your documentation as well. Protocol training records. You say in your protocol, excuse me, that you're going to be meeting every 2 weeks and following up on, any training that's needed and whatnot. But how are you proving that? Okay. So training records. How was it done? Who was there? Who did it? What manner was it done in? If you have, let's say you've got a protocol and you need laboratory results from Kaleida, you need to have a CLIA certificate, you need their CAP certificate, and you need their lab normals as part of your documentation. So all of those things come into play. Specimen tracking logs, all of these things. And I'm going to encourage you to look at the toolkit checklist, because that goes into much more depth than I have here. I kind of pulled out some of those things that maybe you might not think of, and to the extent that things are needed. Basically, you have to prove everything. So as far as the common rule and ICH, common rule is your federal policy for the protection of human subjects. It kind of goes into a lot of obtaining and documenting informed consent, the IRB makeup. It kind of reiterates a lot of those things in the federal code. ICH is that in international Council of Harmonization that tries to make things a little bit more globally even keel. And so they've done a few things there as far as making sure that kind of the 13 points or the core principles of the Declaration of Helsinki are represented. Okay, I've gone through that very, very quickly. Are there any questions so far? Okay. Having heard none, I am going to go on. So When designing and conducting, reporting your research, you also need to be aware of any state and local laws, as well as university policy that comes into play. So for state laws, think along the lines of if you're doing DNA testing, there is certain language that needs to be in your consent form. If you're doing HIV testing, there's language that needs to be represented there as well. One of the things a lot of people don't understand, and this is New York State specific, if you are bringing a mixed tissue sample from one entity into UB, so let's say you're doing a liver biopsy at Kaleida, and you're bringing it into a UB lab, by New York State standards, that is considered an anatomical gift. So there are various things that need to happen with regard to that as well. So the long and the short of it is make sure that you know what your local and state laws are. University policy may also affect your conduct. So make sure you know where to find your policy, what governs the research conduct that you are doing. And if you are audited, it's not only the federal regulations that you got to adhere to, it's also these other ones they're going to look at. So as an example, a lot of people writing their 503 or 508, they get to this question that says, how are you going to be doing the consent process? And there's that little checkbox that we've reviewed, and we're going to follow the SOP 090. Okay. So a lot of people just check that off, but have you read it? Do you know what it says? Have you followed it? More importantly, have you documented that you have followed it? So any auditor that comes in can look at that. They can go, oh, there's an SOP that they're supposed to be following. Get me a copy of the SOP. And that's what you are going to be, I don't want to say judged upon, but that's what you're going to be audited upon. So be careful when you say that you are going to follow an SOP. Make sure you do, and make sure you know what it says.
We have a question in chat.
Sure.
Someone is wondering, does UB have an investigator package with this information for PIs?
As far as GCP, or just generally?
I think she's asking GCP, but please unmute and clarify. GCP.
GCP. Okay, so to a large extent, your GCP training is your GCP training. I will say in the UB IRB library, there is also an investigator manual that I would encourage you to look at. The other is in the library are all the SOPs that pertain to research and the IRB. And the UB policy, research policy, UB-wide, is also available on the UB website. So I would encourage you, if you have questions, you can always contact the CRO. We are happy to field any questions and kind of talk you through things and find out a resource for you if you need it. Hopefully that answered the question.
Thank you.
Okay. And then again, excuse me, rounding out is your medical standard of care, your medical ethics, the responsibility to uphold your standards as per your profession. They don't go away when the subject is in a clinical trial. As I say, that principle of do no harm continues on. Pardon me. Any other questions in this section?
There are none at this time.
Okay. We are going to touch quickly on the responsible parties because, like I say, everybody is involved in making something GCP compliant. So overarching, that responsibilities, the documentation, the attention to detail, documentation, quality, the scientific rigor, the ethical quality, the process quality, documentation, the risk management, and the validation, verification, and inspection. And I'm just going to say it again. Did I mention documentation? If it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. And that's it. It just, I know in medical things that is huge. In research, it is even larger to an extent. I'm not going to read these, excuse me, but you can see that the sponsor responsibilities are vast and all-encompassing there as far as proper qualifications, training, ensuring that you've got, the supply of drug, whatever that happens to be, and that they've adhered to good manufacturing processes, good laboratory processes, all of that good stuff. So that's on them. Sponsors, I just want you to also remember, can be commercial entities like pharma and device companies. They can be government-funded agencies. They can be other institutions that have done that. They can be private foundations, and they can be individuals. And this is where it comes into, excuse me, if you're holding your own, that you have written a protocol and you hold the IND, you are now the sponsor investigator. So all of these things become your responsibility as well as your PI stuff. Monitors, you will have monitors that come in to, especially if you're doing pharma, and some other institutional things will do it as well. But basically, they are looking to see that everything is done appropriately, that you've got source verification, that the qualifications and resources are there, that you've got proper drug accountability, all of those things that they are checking on. They're basically looking at kind of what an auditor would look at without the ramifications, I guess, that go along with an FDA audit. But they are making sure that everything is there. As you look through this list, though, I want you to look at those words: verifying, ensuring. All of these things are in there, and all of those things, again, relate back to documentation. That is how they are going to ensure. That is how they are going to verify. So, excuse me. I think I'll leave it there. Again, I don't want to read to you. IRB responsibilities. Again, there's a very long list, but they consider both the scientific and the ethical aspects of a study. Scientifically unsound research is not ethical, so that is something that they do look at. They need to ensure that risks are minimalized, that risks are reasonable and in association with the anticipated benefits, that risk-benefit ratio is appropriate, excuse me, that they've got equitable subject selection, that you've got informed consent that is conducted and documented correctly, and subject safety is monitored, subject privacy is adequately addressed as well. So again, the PI or the IRB responsibilities, you can see them there. Tantamount, they are subject safety. That's a lot of it. Much of what we do can be traced back to the Declaration of Helsinki. Remember that subjects have the right to be informed. They have the right not to participate. They have the right to withdraw at any time without any kind of backflow. And they have a right to the protection of their privacy. We're going to go into investigator responsibilities because this is kind of where everything kind of shines. I just want you to remember, and again, a lot of these things are coming out of the 1572. That duties can be delegated responsibility cannot be. So as Rich said last week, the buck stops with you. You need to communicate with the IRB, know how you're supposed to, and when you're supposed to communicate with the IRB. When are progress reports needed? When's continuing review needed? What do you do with safety reports? What constitutes reportable new information? So all of those things you need to know, and you need to make sure that you are communicating those things with the IRB. Informed consent process. It's a process. And I always say that it's not a document. It is a process. It is ongoing. It provides for time, communication, to answer questions, to reinforce any information. And the documentation should be of the process. So when somebody says to me, oh yeah, I've got informed consent, and they show me just the consent form, it's like, okay, well, how did you get consent? That's the process, and that's what needs to be documented. Did they have time to ask questions? Did they have time to consider it? Was there any coercion type things? Where were they when they, when they got consent, when you got consent? All of those things. So that is your responsibility as a PI to make sure that informed consent process is there. Protocol compliance. This one I can't speak to enough. No deviation without prior sponsor or IRB approval unless it's to eliminate an immediate harm or hazard to a subject. And excuse me, protocols need to be designed so that they can facilitate and be compliant. So for those of you who are writing your own protocols, think about this carefully when designing your procedures and when they are to happen. Build yourself a buffer zone if it is acceptable for those timing or testing elements. So if your protocol says that you need to get a CBC 4 hours after a procedure, you are deviating from your protocol if you get it at 3.5 hours or 5 hours or 6 hours. Give yourself a buffer. When is it okay? Do I need it 4 hours, but it can be 5 hours? Do I need it any time from 3.5 to 6 hours? Give yourself that leeway. Same thing goes for visit days. If a subject is supposed to be seen on day 14, if you see them on day 15, that is a protocol deviation. And it comes into, okay, can I use that data from day 15? Because it says in my protocol that I need to get that data on day 14. Give yourself some leeway. Anything kind of outside of that is going to be looked at as a protocol deviation by an auditor. So cut yourself some slack. Think about that, and excuse me, and build that into your protocol. Control of investigational products. Drug accountability is huge. And the easiest way to document your receipt of the drug, who dispensed it, to whom, what was returned by the patient, what happened to it after that, all of those things need to be accounted for. So really every pill, every injection, every ointment that you receive and is under your control. We did an atopic dermatitis study, and we had to weigh the ointment containers when we dispensed it, and we had to weigh them when they came back in. So that's the type of specificity I am talking about. Again, if it comes down to refrigeration or even an ambient temperature, if the ambient temperature is somewhere between 58 and 72, how are you going to prove to an auditor that those conditions were met? So again, your temperature logs, your calibration logs, things of that nature, just to make sure that You have done everything you are supposed to in that control of your investigational product. Maintaining your randomization and blinding. Usually unblinding only happens for medical emergencies and then really fully documented. For most sponsor research, this will usually include a reach out to their medical monitor to see if it's absolutely necessary that you be unblinded. How is it going to change your practice? But usually it's fully proceduralized in the protocol as to what happens and what conditions need to be met or when unblinding happens and how that happens. Safety reporting, serious and unexpected results reporting have timelines and that are associated with them to adhere to GCP. Know also what your local IRB timeline is, as well as your sponsor. Usually that is 24 hours from the time that you are made aware of the SAE, the serious adverse event, or the unexpected event. And the nice thing about it is you don't have to know all the ins and outs at the time. So I'm going to tell you, I had a patient that I saw his obituary on a Sunday afternoon. Okay, so now I know he's dead. So I have until Monday afternoon to report it. Chances are by Monday afternoon, I'm not going to know a lot of information other than the patient died. So that's what I am reporting. Follow-ups to follow. And that's fine. That satisfies your reporting responsibility. You have reported the death. Now you can find out all of those things, all the particulars of the death. And then you can do follow-ups to that initial report. But make sure that you get you get that initial within the time frame that you need to. Excuse me. And that, again, is something that the FDA will look at. Yeah, and then again, to continue out the reporting, your safety reports, your progress reports. If you've got progress reports that are required to go to your sponsor, to the IRB, and any final report, especially for NIH, that comes into play. And lastly, I think we've mentioned this a couple of times, your medical care of your study subjects, your do no harm takes precedence over the research activities. Responsible use of the subject data. Make sure that your HIPAA authorizations are in place. So if you're doing things that you're screening, you know, that you've got, I think it's with the HRP 611, 612, if you are going for full waivers. And I may have those numbers wrong. I think Jen Smith's on the line. She can help me if I've got those wrong. But making sure that you've got that proper HIPAA authorization to look at the data that you are looking at. If you are saying that you are going to look at and capture their date of birth, their sex, and their ethnicity, that's what you collect. You do not also collect their con meds or, you know, their past medical history. So responsible use of the data. You tell the IRB what you are going to get, and that's what you get. You don't go all encompassing and then figure out what you need after the fact. And then how do you use that data? Where does it go? How are you protecting it? So the one thing to consider is, and we do this a lot, we have collaborations with other universities. And excuse me, we will send our data. It's like we collect our data here, they collect their data there. We may share it dually. We may just send our data one way. It may be de-identified. It's still our data. So no matter how it is shared outside of the university, a data use agreement needs to be in place. that establishes who owns the data, what they can do with the data, where else it can go, what manner with which it can go. So, and a lot of times it's, even publication around that. So data use agreements become very important. And I think that that's one thing to consider is anytime you're taking your data and taking it outside of UB, you need to consider that you need a DUA in place. Record keeping, we talked a little bit about the regulatory binder essentials a little bit earlier. So for this, I really want to talk more about archiving. And archiving can mean different things to different people. So or different entities, I guess. So as far as the IRB, our local SOP is that we need to keep the information, the study documentation 3 years after the close of the study. Oops, sorry. That's fine. But what else is it governed by? Are you under FDA regulations, which is 2 years after either the date of marketing application is approved or that the investigation is discontinued and the FDA has been notified? That usually amounts to 10 to 15 years. If anything through the Department of Veterans Affairs, that is basically retained indefinitely. NIH is 3 years after the final financial report. If you've got things that are governed under ICH, that can be up to 25 years. So know what your study is governed by. And it is the one that you have to follow is the most restrictive. So you can't say, oh, I'm doing an ICH study but my IRB says I only need to keep it for 3 years. No, you go with the more restrictive. So you need to keep it for, like I say, up to the 25 years. So you need to consider what that all means. Your regulatory binder needs to be in place. You need to make sure that your subject data is going to be there as well. We all know the principles of ALCOA. There is now an expanded acronym for ALCOA. It's ALCOA Plus. They have added a few things there that things need to be complete, that if no deletion has taken place. It includes any changes that may have been made during the life of the data. It's consistent. It's chronologically arranged, usually, and with timestamps. So usually, especially in a regulatory binder, that means like a reverse chronology with the most recent things on top. So if you have a protocol that has been amended 4 times, you will have 4 protocols in your binder with the most recent one on top. Enduring. This one, as technology goes on, this one kind of becomes important because we used to keep things on floppy disk. Okay, so how am I going to regain that or get that data back if it's on a floppy disk, unless I retained the ability to do that or transferred it to something else that is more current? So, and with a documentation that it went from floppy to CD and now from CD to cloud, whatever the case may be, if it's electronic. Things like your EKGs fade over time and you can no longer see them. So you may need to photocopy them so that you've got something that is not going to do the heat dissipation that an EKG machine does. So make sure that it is enduring. It can be hauled up later on. Don't ever think, oh, this study's closed and I can put it away and I'm never going to see it again. I was a coordinator in vascular and it was 8 years after a study had closed and it was being audited. So it can come back. It can come back. It may not happen all the time, but it can happen. And again, available. They need to be, the information needs to be available. I think I've harped on documentation a lot. And so I don't want to belabor the point, but your audit trail is your audit trail. And this is kind of something that, Rich spoke to last week. Excuse me. FDA inspection is a serious thing. Many times it is a not for cause. So if you are a high enroller in a industry sponsored study, you may get an FDA audit. Sometimes if you've had some things with non-compliance, it may be a for cause. Anybody can call that if you've got a reason for that. Excuse me. But the ones that we have seen most often is because of high enrollment, and not for cause. They are not any less nerve-wracking, I guess is the word. But at least you know that they're not kind of playing witch hunt. Brian, I think you've got your hand raised.
I do, thank you. I was just wondering, do auditors have the privilege of asking for records that are beyond the retention stated policies?
If they know about them, yes, which is why you want to put them in a separate room. So if let's say they are auditing study 123 and they noted that, wow, they've really got a problem with the way they do consent. And you put them in a room where they can see that you've got 6 other studies. I was like, I'd like to see because they can do that. I want to look at those ones too.
Oh, thank you. And perhaps, do you know if record retention policies perhaps mirror the statute of limitations for particular laws? I know we're not lawyers. I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
Yeah, I mean, it basically comes down to you have to know what you need to like who you're playing to. So if it is a hospital's policy that upon death they scrub the patient records, but that patient was in a study for you, you have to make sure that you've got the information to back up what you have put in your case report forms. So I guess I don't know if that answers the question as far as your statute, but so they may get rid of after if there's been no activity on a patient for 6 years, whatever. But if you've got a study that you have to keep records for 12 years or 15 years, whatever it is, then anything that you've put into your case report form, make sure you got backup for.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. The most common FDA findings are protocol deviations, entering ineligible subjects. Make sure that you have adhered to the protocol, your timing, your procedures, whatnot. The next one is issues with the consent form. Did the subject sign it and date it in their own handwriting? So if you have, John Smith and he's just signed it and you put the date in there, that's not kosher. The subject has to date it as well. That a consent is obtained before you do any study activities, and that you've got the correct version, the most recently approved, that you've documented the process. Now, I will say, when I say about making sure that you've not done any study procedures before consent, that can be as innocuous as saying, yeah, The protocol needs you to have not taken X drug and you have to fast if we want to do everything today. That's asking, those are study specific requirements. You can't ask them to do that. So that's just kind of keeping that in the back of your mind. It's not, oh, I did an MRI before they got, it can be something as simple as telling them to hold a medication or fast. Those types of things. Documentation issues. The essential documents are huge. Making sure that you've got all of those. Making sure that there is evidence of PI oversight. That comes down to documentation. So, you know, that they have actually seen the patients and or reviewed their documents, reviewed their visit, signed off on labs, noted if anything was a significant finding, whatever that may be. Source documentation, your subject records. Remember that that source documentation is considered the first time that it is recorded. That is basically what source documentation is. If it is missing, erroneous, illegible, inconsistent, those are all issues that need to be ironed out. I always say my source is kind of funky because I was doing a barbecue many years ago, and somebody called me with the SAE information. And so I documented the SAE stuff that I was getting as the first time I'm writing it down. The only thing I had was magic marker in the inside of a charcoal bag. And I can tell you right now, somewhere in the archives is that charcoal bag, 3-hole punched and in my binder, because that's the first time it was written down. So just remember what source documentation means. Your drug and device accountability, storage conditions where they met or you couldn't prove that you met them, that you had controlled access to the drug or the device. Adverse event reporting is huge. You know, outside of time windows, was there an SAE that you did not report appropriately? That you've got abnormal lab findings where they reviewed and identified as not clinically significant or clinically significant by the PI. That also shows PI oversight, things of that nature. Okay, is there any questions so far?
Looks like William Bauer has a question, if you'd like to unmute and ask it.
Sure, Bill.
They can. So what are some of the most common outcomes from protocol deviations? Like what have you seen happen?
It really depends on what they are and how significant. So a lot of times protocol deviations can be something as simple as I was supposed to get vital signs at 5 minutes and I got them at 7 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
In the big picture, that doesn't affect patient safety. So it may not be weighed. If you've got repeat things on protocol deviations, it's going to tell you one of two things. Either you need to step up on getting things done at the appropriate time, or you need to take a look at your protocol and it's like, if you wrote it, do I need to amend my protocol? Is it actually reasonable that I can get that at 5 minutes, or do I need to extend that out? If you've got, blatant deviations as far as, or violations in enrollment criteria, that can be more serious. And if it's a repeat type thing, then, that that kind of raises to the level of serious noncompliance. So it's all, and all those things need to be reported to the IRB, and all of that's going to be an IRB decision.
So in some of the more simple scenarios you outlined, you maybe wouldn't be able to use the data if it's outside the time points, but then in more extreme cases, maybe have the study shut down.
Correct.
And then does it get more serious than that too?
It depends on who finds it. Basically, if it's really serious and you've got a for-cause audit from the FDA, you can have a 483, and 483 can mean that you lose your ability to be a PI. So
Okay.
it really depends on, it depends on a lot of things, but in the kind of least is I've reported it. I've done a how is this not going to have a kappa, and how is this not going to happen again, to, oh my God, this was so bad that we don't, the FDA says you can't do research anymore. So
Okay.
it really, there's all varying things in between there.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that would apply to the investigator, not necessarily the university as a whole.
It can. It depends on, again, it depends
Where the
on
violations are. Yeah.
what the violations are. Should the university have known about it, you know, and or the IRB. IRBs can get 483s as well.
Okay.
So yeah, it really does depend on a lot of different things with that. But yeah, it's not unheard of for a university to have a 483. It may not disqualify them. They may need to do corrective action, which may be the case for the investigator as well. But you always have a chance to answer a 483. But that's definitely on the table.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
There's a question in chat.
Sure.
Someone is wondering, what are differences of consent forms that we have to get from families when, for example, the patient is emergency situation and cannot consent by themselves?
Mm-hmm. So that is if you have identified that may be the case, and you have made the account on your consent form for a legally authorized representative. So in the case, we see this a lot with our stroke studies. So yeah, they're coming into the ER, and you know, they most probably cannot consent for themselves. So they have that extra section in the consent form for an LAR. And so that, you know, and similarly, if you've got parental consent, if you've got assents, you know, it really depends on the nature of your study and, you know, what your expectation is. The answer, hopefully.
Thank you very much. So we have to kind of prepare two types of consent forms in this case. Just in case the patient is unconscious and the patient cannot give the consent, we use that special form. And if the patient is kind of able to do, then we have to use a separate form, right?
No, it can be on the same form.
Oh, okay.
Where you've got one area that if the patient is and I think that in the template, it will, in the 502 template, it does kind of delineate that out where you can put if the patient is capable of signing, or if you want to put the LAR in there in addition to, in the event that they can't sign themselves.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to move on quickly to a couple of the case studies here. So you've noticed in a rural part of your state that there seems to be an excessive amount of Crohn's disease among Latino farm workers. You suspect that there's an exposure to a certain type of bacteria found in the crops that is responsible for the outbreak. So you develop an antibiotic regimen that is highly effective, you think is highly effective for the bacteria, and now you want to conduct a placebo-controlled trial to treat the patients. You develop an informed consent in Spanish, they're Latino farm workers, so you put it in Spanish. It's been approved by the IRB. You hire an interpreter from Interpreters R Us, and they're going to help you with the informed consent. You start to enroll and you are amazed. Absolutely everybody who is asked to enroll is agreeable. There is 100% enrollment. So your interim analysis shows at 6 months that the results are not really what you expected. You take a walk through the housing units, and you notice that there's all these boxes with hundreds of vials of your carefully labeled medication, and none of the seals have been broken on the vials. So you find out that the study subjects all signed onto the consent because onto the study because they thought their job was in jeopardy if they didn't participate. The interpreter did not explain what the trial was about. And to your dismay, the subjects did not read the informed consent because of literacy issues. So if anybody wants to unmute, if you want to just say out, what's good about this trial? Anyone?
Maybe the intentions of the trial. Not much else.
Yeah, it seems to be scientifically sound. That's good. They got IRB approval before they initiated the study. They had good intentions. They translated their consent into Spanish. They obtained a interpreter. And that's about all we could say that's good. So what went wrong and how does that deviate from GCP?
They did not check compliance, like they informed. And
Yep.
informed consent was not explained, and they did not check into it, that if informed consent was explained properly.
Correct. So yeah, informed consent was not informed. You also had a vulnerable population that was prone to coercion, which obviously played out.
Might be some study design issues too. If you thought everyone was infected and you only treated half of them.
Yeah, your risk benefit ratio might be a little bit different.
We have someone in chat that said the interpreter was not likely GCP trained.
Exactly. She was not qualified to perform her task. So, and obviously that became evident when they didn't know what they were doing.
I can't remember the one slide, but was there an unaccounted amount of vials?
No, they were all there. They just were sitting there. They had not been, nobody took their drug.
So aren't you supposed to account for everything that's dispersed, but then unused as well?
Mm-hmm. But if they have not, so it depends on when you are supposed to do your drug accountability. So if they give it and they give the drug out and they're not supposed to come back in or have drug accountability for 2 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever. And if you go in at 1 week and you see that, that's the problem. If they come in at the 2-week visit, that's your accountability there as far as your drug accountability. It was a serendipitous finding before drug accountability was required, but that's kind of where that plays out.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. GI Pharma, promising new growth factor enema for the treatment of ulcerative colitis. They do a clinical trial comparing the growth factor to placebo. The physician in charge of the trial at our university has noted that when the enemas are mixed, one set of the medications is slightly tinted. So he thought the tinted enemas were most likely the active medication. So he gets with the pharmacist, and as the patients are randomized, he notes with the pharmacist, this one's got a higher disease activity than this one, so make sure that this one gets the tinted one versus the other one, and the less active disease people will get the one that's not tinted. We enroll the largest number of patients, and we find that it's not really what we thought it was going to be. The enema is completely ineffective from our results. And we've got a 20% response rate to the active therapy and a 30% response to the placebo. Elsewhere, completely opposite. Considering GCP, what happened?
The study wasn't truly blinded.
Yeah, it was totally biased, right? I mean,
Correct. Yes. So deviating from, so how can the randomization blind be ensured to comply?
Ideally, the medications would look the same as the placebo, but that's not always possible. So,
And when it's not possible, what do you do?
you know, find another way to make it so you can't tell the difference, put it in a dark container or something, or
Precisely.
or just mix it up at random and, don't look at which one you're taking when you do it.
Well, yeah, they need to be blinded better. Excuse me. And so how can they ensure that's not going to happen? And is there a problem with the trial design?
Someone in chat says the physician should not be privy to the drug before administration.
Correct. That is huge. They have introduced bias there. So the other kind of caveat to that is if he is concerned about the patients that have more severe disease getting what he thinks is the medication, the risk benefit ratio may not be there or may not be what he reports it to be. So if he thinks that it's more advantageous for somebody to get what he thinks is the study medication, then and he manipulates things so that happens, then he's thinking that his risk benefit may be a little bit askew. As far as the science, he's non-compliant with the protocol. However, there are design flaws that allowed it to happen. The treating physician needs to be blinded to the investigational product. The randomization needs to be independent and fixed. So it's not a matter of, this patient gets this, or look at that. This is patient 1. They get lot number 674. This is patient 2. They get lot number 555. So that needs to be set up front, and that needs to be adhered to.
Gazella has their hand raised.
Sure.
Hi, so my question is, what would you do about the drugs or devices that are hard to blind? For example, I use a non-invasive brain stimulation technique in my protocol. And with that, with the active one, you feel tingling and some redness on the skin, whereas the non-active one, it cannot happen. And we have even tried like stimulating for 30 seconds with the non-active one, so they can feel that initial reaction, but that sustained reaction is not there, and often participants can tell. So in that situation, what can you do?
Well, that is going to depend on your study makeup. Are you truly doing a double blind, or is it set up as, because if you can tell, is it a single blind where the patient is just blinded to what they're getting? In which case, how are you taking your bias out? And if that may mean you have a tech that does all of the testing, presents the results of that, and somebody else analyzes it. But it really depends on how your protocol is established as to who's blinded.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it's mainly the patients who are blinded, and a tech is doing it, an interventionist. So I get to hear about it, but I don't actually collect data on that.
Yep.
But this is what has been reported when they are doing it.
Yeah. But if it's a single blind and it's patient blind, then you should be good there. Okay. And again, bias was introduced into the trial, I think we've established. So You're looking at a new, I don't know why I've got all these GI things, but we do. Monoclonal antibody for ulcerative colitis. The endpoint is mucosal healing. So to establish that, a sigmoidoscopy is done at the beginning of the trial at screening and at 12 weeks of the study medication. If there's no improvement on the video recording, the patient, if there's improvement, the patient continues on the trial. So the patient returns at 12 weeks and the recording equipment fails. So you do the sigmoidoscopy and things look better in your opinion, and the patient is begging to stay on the trial. You score the endoscopic findings as being slightly better, so therefore this patient has a chance to stay in the trial, and you take pictures, but you don't have video recording. Due to the technology failure, you do not have video documentation of the sigmoidoscopy, but you do have pictures. Should this patient remain in the trial? What are your responsibilities for GCP?
You mind if I actually have something?
Sure.
Okay. Isn't that just a slightly narrow protocol? And you're not accounting for any failures, and you could have accounted for that in the protocol to say pictures can be used if the video equipment failed?
Yes,
Okay.
but this is a sponsor protocol. So the sponsor has written this protocol.
Oh, got it.
And the sponsor says at 12 days or 12 weeks, you are going to get a video recording. So as far as this goes, the failure of the equipment leads to problems with reporting, interpretation, and verification of the results. You want there to be an improvement so the patient can remain in the trial because they've been begging you. So you may have a little bit of a bias in your looking at the pictures and saying that it looks better to me.
Brian says if you can't document it, it didn't happen. And furthermore, was the later exam beyond the time frame in the protocol?
God bless you, Brian. So we don't know about the timing of the protocol. They say 12 weeks. So at 12 weeks, they tried to do the sigmoidoscopy. And yes, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. So the critical technology that was needed for this study should have had consistent quality checks. They should have been documented. And what happens to prevent the failure. And then what happens if there is one? So so this is where you get into the sponsor could have written in if there's a problem with the video recording, you can go out to the following week or up to another week to get the video recording. But pictures will not be accepted. You know, whatever that result is, there should be a plan for that, and that's on the sponsor. They need to have something in place to deal with some sort of technology failure. What are they going to do? How are they going to deal with it? What happens to the data?
Brian's now asking, would it be prudent to report the equipment failure?
You're going to report it obviously to the sponsor, to the IRB. It doesn't, probably not. It doesn't meet the threshold of a serious adverse event. You can, I mean, I always go with it's better to over-report than under-report, but definitely, I mean, this doesn't really affect patient safety. It affects whether or not they can stay in the trial, which, you know, is, so they're going to get standard of care otherwise. But I mean, that's kind of where it comes down to. It really depends on the patient and what happens with them in the long run.
Thank you.
Okay, we have about 7 minutes remaining. Please ask questions if you need to, but if you'd like to go through a couple of the
Oh,
ABC.
Yeah, I'm gonna do these
Good.
ones really quick and probably just kind of skim through them so that you can at least see the cases. You've got atopic dermatitis. They develop a viral infection. What constitutes a serious adverse event according to ICH, GCP, and that is going to be B. They classified as a significant incapacity. It has affected their life for the past 6 months and taken them out of what they normally would be doing. You are a coordinator for a study that is testing a factor 10 inhibitor, DVT prophylaxis, in a post-operative patient. You're having a lot of difficulty enrolling. So one morning your PI calls you from the OR holding area, says, come consent this patient. They're going for some abdominal surgery. He met with the patient that morning in holding, and after he looked at the daily schedule, talked with them, and they said, yep, I'll take part in your study. So GCP issues with this scenario. Compromised, and as a coordinator, what are you going to do? So GCP, have they given enough time to get consent? Probably not. Are they being coerced? Could be. You're in holding, you're going into surgery, and a surgeon is standing over you asking if you want to be in their study. So as a coordinator, what are you going to do? So I can tell you this is a scenario directly out of my experience. And this was fairly new in my career, and I got consent. Didn't sit with me. So I stuck around and waited till after the surgery, after she got back into her room, and I went through everything again. Said, you realize this is, just went through everything, reiterated, this is voluntary. You do not have to do this if you do not want to. And she did withdraw. So it really comes down to as sometimes you've got really strong opinionated PIs and you've got to work with that, but you also have to be beholden to your own GCP. You are responsible for your GCP and maintaining that, especially if you know better. You got a patient, he's got an unexpected heart attack, he's hospitalized, and the investigator thinks it's related to the study. They unblind it, but he turns out he's on placebo. How is the sponsor supposed to report this? And this is the sponsor reporting it. So you know it's an SAE, he's been hospitalized, so you have reported it. But now what does the sponsor have to do? Again, this comes into their responsibility, and they get to decide. Because it's placebo, you've already established that it's placebo that they have received. It's not their study drug, so they get to decide how they're going to do that. Your coordinator for an unfunded investigator-initiated study, and somebody is supplying the 2 drugs for you. The PI tells you that Mrs. Jackson is in clinic and she signed consent. He wants you to randomize her. And you go and you look at everything and you see her last EKG or echo is from 2 months ago. And the study protocol that the investigator wrote states that it needs to be within 1 month of enrollment. So before you randomize, you tell the PI what you've got. He says, oh, it was arbitrary time frame. It really doesn't mean anything for the echo. You can go ahead and randomize her. So as a coordinator in this, again, you're sticking to your GCP. You know that that's not right. So now you've convinced your PI that in order to enter the study, the patient has got to have a repeat of their echo. So he writes a script, sends her down to the echo outpatient department. She gets there. She gives them over the insurance. She pays her copay. She has her testing done. She comes back, and now she's ready to be into the trial. Anything to be concerned about with her study involvement?
Yeah, this was not a medically necessary echo. So either it has to be covered by to study. or-
Excellent. Yeah, that's exactly it. You've got a billing compliance issue here.
Right, yeah.
So anything that is strictly done for research needs to be covered by the research. I'm going to skip by that one. Pregnancy is sometimes it's reported as an SAE, but not always. Again, I'm going to kind of skip over that. This one, investigator has decided to use AI machine learning to scan patient records. He's got the appropriate HIPAA waivers in place, whatever, and to find out about recruitment to his clinical trial. He uses an algorithm. It spits out 45 patients with defined attributes. And he takes that list and he goes and he obtains consent and he enrolls them all and he starts them on any problems? It's AI. So there is no human oversight. So you've fed an algorithm to a machine. The machine looks for certain things, looks for certain other things that are not there, but nobody has looked at it to say, yeah, they actually do meet inclusion exclusion. It's great and dandy and wonderful. You've taken it down from 250 people to 45 people that you got to look at, but you still got to look at them to make sure that they actually are enroll worthy. ICH GCP does not mention AI in specific terms. They mention it broadly as developing technologies. So I think we can expect some more guidance in the future on this as the field grows.
Great, thank you. Can we possibly look at the objectives and if anybody has any questions about them?
And so just kind of reiterating on the objectives, we took a look at the components. We looked at the responsibilities for everybody, highlighted the investigator responsibilities, and we did go rather quickly through some of those case studies, but we did go through some case studies and you will have the additional ones there that you can look at with my notes in there as well.
Excellent. Does anyone else have any other questions?
They all want to go to dinner.
Great, no problem. Thank you. And thank you very much for the excellent presentation.
Everybody have a
Wonderful
great
night.
evening. Thanks.
Hey, everyone, have a great day.